My car accident was classified as a simple traffic incident. Robert Johnson was too cunning. He deliberately chose a stretch of road without surveillance to block me. After the incident, he vehemently denied everything, and with Emily providing him an alibi, there was no substantial evidence to prove what he had done to me. The matter was left unresolved. I sat on a cloud, looking down at everything from a godlike perspective, feeling utterly disheartened. I saw my dear sister, Emily, crying her heart out in Robert Johnson's arms.
Daisy is my own sister. No one is more upset than I am about what happened to her. I lied to protect you. You must swear now, if you don't treat me well, you'll face the consequences. May the heavens strike you down.
I sneered. If there were truly consequences, my dear sister should be first in line. At that moment, an ethereal voice asked me,
"Given your good conduct in life, you are now rewarded with a chance to be reborn. You have 3 minutes to decide."
"Rebirth? There's no need to think about it." I sat on a cloud, looking down at everything from a godlike perspective, feeling utterly disheartened. Below, my dear sister, Emily, was crying her heart out in Robert Johnson's arms.
Daisy is my own sister. No one is more upset than I am about what happened to her. I lied to protect you. You must swear now, if you don't treat me well, you'll face the consequences. May the heavens strike you down.
I sneered. If there were truly consequences, my dear sister should be first in line. At that moment, an ethereal voice asked me,
"Given your good conduct in life, you are now rewarded with a chance to be reborn. You have 3 minutes to decide."
"Rebirth? There's no need to think about it." Robert Johnson's infidelity was eventually discovered by Emily. That day, I had planned to go to the library with her, but something came up, so she went to the KTV where Robert worked ahead of me. Shortly after she left, I received a call from her.
Daisy, I want to end this situation and break up with Robert.
Emily, what's wrong? What happened?
That jerk Robert. He's with another woman. I just got to the KTV and saw him hugging that vixen. If I hadn't come early, who knows how long he would have deceived me.
That's outrageous. How could he do that?
Anna Smith sat next to me, holding the milk tea I had just bought for her in one hand, and her phone displaying the KTV's surveillance footage in the other. Emily and Robert had no idea the KTV where Robert worked was owned by Anna's family. To help me, Anna had retrieved the remote access credentials for the KTV's surveillance cameras from her father's phone. With just a phone, we could monitor the KTV in real time. Half an hour earlier, Anna had messaged me, saying she saw Robert bringing the same girl from last time to the KTV. I then pretended that my class advisor needed me, prompting Emily to go find Robert ahead of schedule. Seeing Robert's infidelity firsthand, Emily was heartbroken and even talked about not wanting to live anymore. I comforted her over the phone while taking a cab to the KTV. As soon as I got out of the cab, I heard Robert yelling at Emily.
"Can you stop being unreasonable? I told you, she's a client. If I don't take care of her, how will I meet my targets?"
But haven't I already topped up over $2,000 on the card? That's all my living expenses.
2,000 is nothing. Do you know how much it costs to raise a child? If I don't earn more now, what will happen to you and the baby?
Robert's words were self-righteous. Despite his infidelity, he made it sound like he was doing it all for Emily and the baby. My worldview shattered, and the ridiculous part was that Emily seemed convinced by him.
Is that true? You really have nothing with her? Then why were you hugging and kissing her?
It was just for show at the table. How can you be so naive and not understand that?
Robert's excuses were identical to those from my previous life. And just like before, Emily was quickly placated by him. Seeing me arrive, Robert claimed he had to get back to work and told Emily to take a cab home. I walked over and handed Emily a tissue. She wiped her tears and looked at me expectantly.
Daisy, did you hear what he said? Should I believe him?
Of course, you should believe him.
I knew that Emily didn't really want to break up with Robert, she just needed someone to vent her emotions to. And I was that someone. In my previous life, every time she fought with Robert, she would come to me crying. I would seriously advise her to break up and stay away from him. But what did she do? She would turn around and throw herself into Robert's arms, showing him our chat logs.
Look, my sister is advising me to break up with you, saying I deserve someone better. But I'm still wholeheartedly with you. You have to treat me well and make it up to me.
There's an old saying, good advice is wasted on those who won't listen. On the way back to school, seeing that Emily was still downcast, I suggested.
Emily, if you can't trust him, why not get married soon? Once you're married, he can't leave you for the rest of his life.
I want to get married soon too. But I haven't graduated yet. How could Mom and Dad possibly agree to me getting married now?
An engagement would work too. Sooner or later, Mom and Dad will find out you're expecting. Talk to them properly, and they'll support you.
No. If Mom and Dad find out, they'll force me to end the situation. I can't let them find out so soon. At least wait until the baby is past 3 months. I read online that you can't terminate a situation after 3 months.
With my well-intentioned reminder, Emily decided to keep the situation a secret from our parents until the baby was stable, then quickly get engaged to Robert. Today's events left her anxious. She was terrified of being abandoned by Robert while expecting and desperately wanted to use a marriage certificate to tie him down. But she would never understand that this dysfunctional relationship only trapped her. With my encouragement, Emily decided to have Robert Johnson's child and marry him.
Once the baby is born, Robert will never be able to leave me. Even if he doesn't want me, he won't abandon his son. By then, the 3 of us will be a happy family, and Mom and Dad will bless us.
Emily envisioned her beautiful future, but I knew it would never come. Robert Johnson had far more secrets than she could ever imagine. Emily worried that Mom and Dad would find out about her pregnancy and force her to terminate it. So, she lied to them, saying she had to participate in school activities every weekend and couldn't come home. Thus, she hid at school to nurture her pregnancy, and soon, the baby was over 3 months along. The pregnancy began to affect her, causing morning sickness and a gradually swelling belly. Before long, unpleasant rumors started spreading around the school.
Sweetie, your sister hasn't been home for 2 months. Is she hiding something from us?
Mom, why would you ask that?
This morning, I went shopping and overheard 2 students from your school gossiping about a junior in the English department being pregnant. Walking around campus with a big belly. Can you believe that?
English department. Junior year. That was Emily's majoring year. Big belly was a bit exaggerated. Emily was naturally slim, so her pregnancy was indeed noticeable. I had thought these rumors were confined to the school, but I didn't expect Mom and Dad to find out so quickly. It played right into my hands. I thought for a moment and gently replied to Mom. Mom, don't overthink it. How could Emily be so reckless? I had dinner with her yesterday, and she's doing well. She's even gained some weight.
Gained weight? Your sister usually hates sour things. Why would she eat limes?
Mom knew our preferences too well, nothing escaped her notice. Just mentioning limes made her drive to the school and bring Emily home. Faced with Mom and Dad's questioning, Emily initially denied everything. But during dinner, the smell of Mom's stew made her run to the bathroom to throw up. The lie was exposed. Emily cried and begged, hoping Mom and Dad would let her keep the baby, but it backfired. They scolded her for being irresponsible and almost hit her. Emily had a huge argument with them, grabbed her phone, and tried to leave to find Robert Johnson. Mom chased after her and was pushed to the ground by Emily. "Mom! Are you okay?" I didn't expect Emily to do that and quickly helped Mom up. Fortunately, she wasn't hurt. Emily just glanced back at Mom and continued running out. Seeing this, Dad was furious and dragged Emily back, locking her in her room. They scheduled an appointment with a doctor, planning to take her for a procedure at dawn. I cut some fruit to comfort Mom, who was crying in anger, with several new gray hairs. It pained me to see her like this. I remembered the previous life. After my incident, Mom was so distressed that she had a heart attack and ended up in the ICU. Dad took care of her while desperately seeking the truth about the accident, turning gray overnight. And my dear sister, Emily, only hid in Robert Johnson's rented room and cried. Thinking of this, I became even more determined. In this life, I couldn't be soft-hearted towards Emily. I had already given her 2 chances. If she had chosen to break up decisively when she caught Robert cheating, or if she had listened to Mom and Dad and terminated the pregnancy, then everything might have returned to normal. But alas, there's no cure for being blinded by love. Late at night, I kept an eye on my phone and, sure enough, received a message from Emily.
Daisy, are Mom and Dad asleep? Help me open the door. I need to see Robert.
Mom and Dad had confiscated Emily's phone but overlooked the old phone she still had in her room. Even without a SIM card, it could still be used with Wi-Fi. Without a word, I took out the key I had prepared and quietly opened her room door.
Thank you, Daisy. You're my son's savior.
I smiled at her and simply said, "Go ahead, Robert is waiting for you." And so, Emily left home with an old phone and a few bucks. About an hour after she left, a message from Anna Smith arrived.
It's quite lively tonight.
Anna sent a 40-minute-long video, which was the surveillance footage from her family's KTV. In the video, Emily stood in the lobby after arriving at the KTV, calling and messaging Robert Johnson on WeChat, but there was no response from him. Growing anxious, Emily asked the front desk which private room Robert was in and then rushed to find him. A few minutes later, she ran out of the room crying, followed by a wealthy woman dressed in extravagant jewelry. The woman stormed out, with Robert trailing behind her, pleading. Yes, Robert had completely ignored Emily and chased after the wealthy woman instead. The camera then switched to the KTV entrance, where Robert blocked the woman's luxury car, bowing and smiling obsequiously. Suddenly, Emily appeared out of nowhere, attacking the woman and tearing off the gold necklace from her neck. The woman was terrified, and Robert quickly stepped in to rescue her, pushing Emily to the ground. Emily clutched her stomach, writhing in pain. A crowd gathered around, pointing and whispering, but no one stepped forward to help her. The woman got into her car, and the driver sped away. Robert abandoned Emily again, chasing the car for a while. When he couldn't catch up, he angrily slapped Emily across the face. After watching this melodrama, I frowned and messaged Anna.
What happened next?
Before Anna could reply, I heard my parents' anxious voices outside the room.
The city hospital called. Lily is in the emergency room.
What happened? How did she sneak out?
Let's go to the hospital first.
Lily is my sister's name. The hospital had called my dad directly, and it sounded serious. I quickly got dressed and followed them.
Mom, Dad, I'm coming with you.
I sat on a cloud, observing everything from a godlike perspective, feeling utterly disheartened. Below, my dear sister, Emily, was sobbing uncontrollably in Robert Johnson's arms.
Daisy was my sister. No one is more upset about what happened to her than I am. I lied to protect you. Swear to me now, if you don't treat me right, you'll face the consequences. May the heavens punish you.
I sneered. If there were truly consequences, my dear sister should be first in line.
Given your good conduct in life, you are now rewarded with a chance to be reborn. You have 3 minutes to decide.
Rebirth? There's no need to think about it. Half a month later, rumors about Emily were rampant at school. Her pregnancy was becoming more obvious, and wherever she went, people pointed and whispered. Helpless, the school administration talked to her and helped her take a leave of absence. After leaving school, Emily started living the happy life of a family of 3 ahead of time. However, the adorable son she had imagined was replaced by Robert Johnson's mother. Mrs. Johnson moved in to live with them in their small, 30-square-meter rental apartment to take care of the baby in her womb. The 3 of them lived together harmoniously. A few days later, Emily suddenly called me.
Daisy, can you lend me some money?
I had anticipated this call, though it came sooner than I expected.
What's wrong, Emily?
Mom and Dad have stopped giving me living expenses, and Robert is also short on cash. We don't even have money to buy groceries.
How could this happen? Isn't your mother-in-law helping you out?
Sigh, don't even mention it. She goes out to play mahjong every day. Robert finally got his paycheck, but she lost it all in 2 days and even owes a lot of money. A few days ago, debt collectors came and smashed everything in the house.
Oh my God, were you hurt?
We're fine, but we really have no money left. I haven't been able to go for my prenatal checkups, and the last medical bill is still unpaid. We adults can endure some hardship, but there's a baby in my belly.
Emily poured out her troubles.
Daisy, I'm really at my wit's end. I can only ask for your help.
Hearing her sobs on the other end of the line, I felt no sympathy. I had long known things would come to this. Anna Smith had already helped me find out that Robert Johnson's family was a bottomless pit. Mrs. Johnson loved playing cards and could sit at the table all day. Mr. Johnson was a heavy drinker who often got drunk and caused trouble in the village. Although Robert was an only child, he had many cousins, each more troublesome than the last. Ever since they found out Robert was working in the city, his relatives had come to the KTV several times. Who knows what kind of lies Robert had told them in the village? His relatives would come into the KTV, demanding the manager serve them the most expensive drinks, claiming to be related to Mr. Johnson. Robert, just a waiter, had no such influence. Each time, he would put on a brave face and pay out of his own pocket to entertain them. Over time, he owed the KTV thousands just in drink bills. From Emily's tone, it was clear she had no idea about these family issues.
I don't have much money and can't help you. But there's another way.
What way?
Aren't you two getting engaged soon? Once you receive the engagement gifts, you should have some money, right?
Emily fell silent at the mention of it.
What's wrong? Aren't you two getting along well? Or is he refusing to get engaged?
No, it's just that he's been too busy to arrange it.
From her tone, it was clear she knew busy was just an excuse. The real reason for Robert's delay was becoming harder to hide. Another week passed. Under Emily's persistent urging, she and Robert finally set a date for their engagement party. The venue was a restaurant near the KTV. Emily sent me an electronic invitation, subtly hinting that I shouldn't tell our parents. Even now, she was worried they would break up her happiness. I video called Emily.
Isn't his family from Johnson Village? Having the engagement party so far away, won't it be inconvenient for his relatives?
He said he didn't want to make me feel slighted, so he chose the city. Robert is actually quite good to me.
Emily said, looking blissful on the screen. In just over a month, she had visibly become much more haggard. She used to be thin but had a rosy complexion and fair skin, always exuding an elegant and artistic aura. Now, she was gaunt and pale, with lifeless eyes. She looked like a walking skeleton, with only her belly protruding. She held her phone on the balcony, with a background of a cluttered rental apartment filled with trash, takeout boxes, bottles, and cigarette butts. She wore a yellowed, ill-fitting white t-shirt stained with grease and burnt holes from cigarettes. Seeing this scene, I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Just half a year ago, Emily was a top student representing the school in an English speech contest. I vividly remembered her standing on stage, radiating a dazzling light. But now...
Sis, I wish you happiness.
On the day of the engagement party, I arrived at the restaurant mentioned in the invitation with Anna Smith. Although I had anticipated that the Johnson family wouldn't spend much on the banquet, it wasn't until I saw the place with my own eyes that I truly understood how stingy they could be. The small restaurant was old and shabby, with only 2 8-person tables inside. At Robert Johnson's request, the owner had set up a tent at the entrance and added another table. The place was greasy, with green-headed flies buzzing everywhere. If I hadn't seen my sister and Robert Johnson greeting guests at the door, I wouldn't have believed anyone would hold an engagement party in such a place. I braced myself and walked in. As soon as I entered, Mrs. Johnson's loud voice called out,
"Come on, come on! Just hand the red envelopes to me."
She had a big red bag slung over her shoulder, specifically for collecting guests' gifts. Worried that some might come empty-handed, she even had a payment code hanging on her chest, ready to collect money. It was almost as if she was about to rob the guests. I handed the prepared red envelope to Mrs. Johnson. She felt its thickness and smiled with satisfaction.
"Sit anywhere you like."
Anna and I found a relatively clean corner. Just as we sat down, a few more people entered. Leading the group was the KTV manager, who recognized Anna. Seeing her inside, the manager was a bit surprised but quickly came over to greet her.
"Anna, I didn't expect to see you here."
Anna put a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. The manager understood and led the other KTV colleagues to another table. Robert Johnson had invited all the KTV employees. Except for those working today, everyone else came to support him, and their red envelopes were quite generous. Mrs. Johnson's smile reached her ears. More people trickled in, most of them looking like students. They all seemed familiar, they were my sister's close friends from childhood. Everyone was murmuring, their expressions complicated. I took out my phone, snapped a few photos, and then excused myself to the restroom, leaving my seat. I exited through the back door. As I passed through the stinky kitchen, I overheard the restaurant owner talking to Robert Johnson's father.
"Robert, your son is really something, finding a college student."
What's so special about a college student? If she weren't expecting, my son wouldn't even look at her.
"Marrying a college student must cost a lot in dowry, right?"
With her skinny arms and legs, she can't do any work. It's good enough that my family is willing to take her in, and she still dares to ask for a dowry.
"Got a wife without spending a penny? How much dowry did her family give?"
Her dad's an official, her mom works at a bank, and they have a lot of money. They can't have a son, so all their money will eventually go to my son.
"I heard from your wife that she has a clever younger sister. You should be careful."
What's there to fear from a girl? Once my son disciplines her, she'll behave.
The stench from the kitchen made me nauseous, and I quickly walked away, escaping the foul-smelling place. The back door of the restaurant led to a dark alley, almost identical to the place where I had my accident in my previous life. I looked around with satisfaction, switched to a new anonymous phone card, and sent out the photos I had just taken.
Where are you?
Setting the stage.
This engagement party of your sister's is really something. None of the relatives from either side are here.
Don't worry, they'll be here soon. After the fallout with our parents, my sister wouldn't dare mention the engagement to any family relatives. As for the Johnson family's relatives, I had kindly informed them. I also notified a few friends. About 10 minutes later, Emily and Robert Johnson were toasting when a group of people barged into the restaurant.
Hey, isn't this little Robert? How come you didn't invite us to such a big event like your engagement?
Anna Smith recognized him immediately.
Robert's cousin? This doesn't look good.
Previously, I had asked Anna to help me investigate Robert's family, and she had found out about this yellow-haired cousin. I frowned the moment I saw his photo. In my past life, when Robert Johnson cornered me in an alley, this yellow-haired guy was the most ruthless. The men behind him were also Robert's cousins. But Robert looked like a mouse seeing a cat when he saw them. He quickly stepped forward, offering a cigarette respectfully.
Brother, what brings you here today?
Cut the crap.
Tom slapped the back of Robert's head harshly.
You've had this banquet, so you must have collected quite a bit of money, right? Pay up now, or I'll turn your celebration into a disaster.
Brother, please don't do this. We're family. Give me some face.
Family, my foot.
Tom's words were crude as he flipped over the table at the entrance. The commotion caused the guests inside to quickly leave, not wanting to get involved. In no time, only Anna and I remained calmly seated in the restaurant.
Tom, we're family. What are you doing?
Aunt, you remember we're family now? You promised to repay the loan in a week. How long has it been? Is this how you treat family?
Tom and his brothers worked at a financial company, essentially loan sharks. Mrs. Johnson had lost all her money gambling, and I had secretly left Tom's business card at their door. Sure enough, Mrs. Johnson borrowed money from them. Recently, Robert's family had been avoiding Tom, even keeping the engagement party a secret from their relatives. If I hadn't kindly sent the engagement photos and location to Tom, he wouldn't have had the chance to crash the party. Tom and his men started smashing things with sticks. Mrs. Johnson, terrified, huddled in a corner, shaking like a leaf.
Tom, the money's in Aunt's bag.
Tom's eyes locked onto the big red bag Mrs. Johnson was clutching tightly. He snatched it and dumped its contents on the floor, scattering the guests' red envelopes everywhere.
You had money all along!
No. That's my money. It's mine.
Mrs. Johnson, summoning some courage, lunged to protect the envelopes, but she was no match for them. Tom kicked her aside and picked up the thickest envelope. Mrs. Johnson clutched her stomach in pain, crying out, while her husband and son had already fled in fear. Anna shielded me, and over her shoulder, I saw Emily and Robert hiding behind the cash register. Laughably, Robert, a grown man, had my pregnant sister shielding the entrance while he cowered inside. Looking at Robert and then at Anna, I suddenly felt that my childhood friend, who was even afraid of horror movies, wasn't so cowardly after all.
Damn it! You dare to mess with me?
Tom, expecting a windfall, turned crimson as he opened envelopes filled only with blank paper, finding just a few pitiful bills. Emily stood frozen. Seizing her chance, she grabbed a piece of paper and her face blanched. They were all IOUs signed by Robert Johnson. For the past 2 years, Robert had been borrowing small amounts from his colleagues at the KTV. He never borrowed much, just $100 or $200, but over time, the IOUs piled up. The manager lent him nearly 10,000 yuan but never got repaid. After a drunken night, he told Anna Smith, who devised a plan. As for the large envelope, it contained Emily's certificates. Our parents had always been proud of her, displaying her trophies and certificates. But after a tragic event, Dad sold the trophies, and Mom threw away the certificates. I secretly retrieved them, thinking they were Emily's best dowry. Unable to get the money, Tom and his gang were furious. After smashing things up, they turned their sticks towards us. I was prepared and pulled Anna Smith towards the back door.
Sis! This way!
The front door was tightly blocked by Tom and his men, leaving Emily and Robert Johnson's family with no choice but to follow me. We escaped into a narrow alley, and quick-thinking John locked the back door of the restaurant, temporarily trapping Tom and his gang inside.
Robert, what do we do now?
They'll definitely go to our house to block us. We can't go back. We need to find a place to hide.
But where can we go?
Emily, who had never seen such a scene, was terrified, her eyes red as she clung to Robert Johnson's clothes, trembling uncontrollably. I stood aside, checking the time. Just then, there was a commotion at the alley entrance. I knew Robert Johnson's family wouldn't be able to go anywhere today. To avoid being implicated by Robert Johnson, I quickly pulled Anna Smith towards the alley entrance. Outside, a crowd surged into the alley, brushing past us. At the alley entrance, I called the police before stopping to watch the scene unfold.
Who is she?
Before he could answer, another short-haired girl stepped forward and slapped him hard.
Robert Johnson, how many girls have you been to timing?
In the crowd, 3 more women stepped forward, all of them victims deceived by Robert Johnson. Among them were young girls who had come to the city for work, students who hadn't yet graduated, and even a divorced woman with a child. Over the past 2 years, they had all been fooled by Robert Johnson's sweet words, giving all their hard-earned money to the KTV to help him boost his performance. Anna Smith had retrieved the KTV's customer records and easily found their phone numbers. When I sent the restaurant's location to Tom and his gang, I also sent it to all of Robert Johnson's girlfriends. Moreover, the messages I sent out were far more than just 5. Robert Johnson's girlfriends had brought along some people, trapping Robert Johnson's family in the alley, making it impossible for them to escape. Some were crying, some were cursing, and some rolled up their sleeves and started fighting. Soon, Tom and his gang kicked open the restaurant's back door and joined the brawl. The alley was filled with the sounds of shouting and cries of pain. A taxi stopped by the roadside. A limping rural girl got out, followed by a burly man with a menacing scar running from his mouth to his ear, making him look terrifying. The two looked around as if searching for someone. Soon, the tall man spotted Robert Johnson in the alley and led the limping girl towards him. As they passed by me, I saw the man pull out a folding knife from his pocket. The next second, Robert Johnson's agonized scream echoed through the alley.
Help! Someone's been hurt.
The scene was chaotic. Anna Smith and I stood at a distance, unable to see anything clearly. We only saw something being thrown from the alley onto the road, instantly crushed by a passing truck. It wasn't until we got to the hospital that I learned it was Robert Johnson's male characteristic. The scar-faced man was taken away by the police, but the limping girl who was with him stayed at the hospital. While Robert was in the operating room, the limping girl stared expressionlessly at the door. Mrs. Johnson, who usually fought fiercely for her son, didn't dare to trouble the girl this time. She just sat nearby, crying endlessly.
My son. What did our family do to deserve this?
Emily sat beside Mrs. Johnson, too shocked to speak or move after everything that had happened. She had also been beaten in the alley, her face and hands covered in bruises.
Is the child in your belly Robert's?
Who are you? What do you want?
Mrs. Johnson immediately stood up, shielding Emily.
Rachel, don't do anything rash. I know Robert wronged you before, but now he's already been dealt with by your brother. This is the last bloodline of our family. I'm begging you, as his mother, please spare us.
What's the rush? Don't worry, I'm not like Robert.
With that, Rachel turned and walked away, dragging her lame leg with some difficulty. I ran over to help her, but she refused. At that moment, Emily suddenly chased after her, grabbing Rachel's arm.
What's your relationship with Robert?
Enemies.
Rachel glared at Emily, shaking off her hand. Emily wanted to ask more, but I stepped in, stopping her. Don't bother her anymore.
Daisy, do you know her?
Watching Rachel limp into the elevator, I sighed. She is Robert's ex-wife. The term ex-wife wasn't quite accurate. In reality, Rachel and Robert were never legally married. Rachel had been violated by Robert and became pregnant with his child. To keep things quiet, the Johnson family held a small ceremony to bring Rachel into the family. Rachel had resigned herself to living with Robert, but one day, during a trivial argument, Robert beat her severely with a rolling pin. Rachel lost her 5-month-old baby and was left with permanent health issues, including her disabled right leg, all thanks to Robert. At that time, Rachel's brother, Michael, had just been released from prison. Upon learning what had happened, he grabbed a kitchen knife and went after Robert. Robert, terrified, packed up and fled overnight, hiding in the city to work, never daring to return to the village. After I finished telling this story, Emily was stunned.
Daisy, how do you know all this?
Last month, the club organized a trip to the mountains for sketching. I made a special trip to the Johnson village. At this point, I didn't hide anything from her. Robert's actions were no secret, everyone in the village knew. Emily's eyes reddened.
If you knew, why didn't you tell me earlier?
Would you have believed me? In my previous life, all my earnest warnings fell on deaf ears. I told her Robert was a bad person, not only unfaithful but also deeply in debt. She immediately called Robert in front of me.
Robert, do you have someone else? My sister told me you owe money. I don't believe her unless you swear you're not lying.
Emily never believed me. My well-intentioned warnings were met with her running to Robert, complaining and acting coy. This back and forth made Robert resent me. When he attacked me with a baseball bat, he cursed me for getting in the way of his pursuit of wealthy women. Now, all the facts were laid bare in the most brutal way. Only then did Emily ask why I hadn't told her earlier. I turned and left the hospital. As I walked into the elevator, the operating room door opened.
The patient is out of immediate danger. However, regarding future fertility, I'm truly sorry.
The next time I saw Emily, it was a stormy day. She was heavily pregnant, kneeling at our doorstep in the pouring rain. My parents thought she had finally seen Robert Johnson's true colors and was ready to come home.
Dad, please save Robert. If he goes to jail, what will happen to me and my child?
It turned out that after Robert woke up, he faced not only the devastating news that he could no longer function properly but also an arrest warrant from the police. During the chaos in the alley that day, Tom had been seriously injured and accused Robert of being the assailant. Tom's father, a local big shot, had already hired a lawyer, determined to see Robert imprisoned for life. Because my father worked in the judicial system, Robert's parents had persuaded Emily to come back and plead for help, hoping my father could pull some strings. But such matters, even for close family, couldn't challenge the law's boundaries.
No, I won't help. You must understand the law is above all.
My father immediately refused Emily and even slapped her in anger. Yet, despite this, Emily refused to leave. For Robert's sake, she knelt in the rain all night until she collapsed from exhaustion. The ambulance rushed her to the hospital, and after hours of emergency treatment, Emily finally woke up. but the child in her womb was lost.
The patient was already in poor health. We had advised proper rest last time. How could you let her get soaked in the rain?
The doctor, unaware of the full story, assumed the rain had caused the loss. He couldn't imagine the series of dreadful events that had transpired in just a month, each enough to endanger the child's life. Sitting in the hospital room, I felt dazed. Sometimes, I wondered if what I did was right. Did I really cause the loss of an innocent life?
That child not being born into the Johnson family might be a blessing in disguise.
I was taken aback. Indeed, who would want to be born into the Johnson family, a bottomless pit? Bang! The hospital room door was suddenly flung open. Robert's parents stormed in. Seeing Emily's flat abdomen on the bed, they went berserk, lunging at me and my parents.
You killed my grandchild. That was the last of the Johnson bloodline. Such a sin. Such a sin.
Their deafening cries woke Emily and attracted the hospital security. The guards quickly subdued Robert's parents.
You deserve to pay for this.
But before he could raise his hand, he suddenly convulsed, foaming at the mouth, and collapsed.
Robert! Robert, what's happening to you?
She blamed everything on Emily, cursing her viciously.
You jinx! It's all your fault. You ruined my son, killed my grandchild, and now you're harming my husband. You deserve to be punished.
Mother-in-law, how can you?
Emily, just waking from anesthesia and still disoriented, was bombarded by Robert's mother's tirade. Suddenly, she seemed to realize something and looked sharply at her abdomen. She knew better than anyone what a flat stomach meant.
My child? Where's my child? Give me back my child.
The loss of her baby shattered Emily's last shred of sanity. She screamed, ripping out the fork from her hand, and leaped off the bed, attacking everyone in the room like a wild beast. A few days later, Emily was transferred from the city hospital to a psychiatric facility. Robert Johnson's case went to trial, and the first trial found him guilty of causing serious harm, sentencing him to 7 years in prison.
It was me who caused the injury, not my son. Please reconsider the verdict.
The police re-examined the evidence. In the second trial, Robert was sentenced to 10 years, and Mrs. Johnson, as an accomplice, received 3 years. Both mother and son were imprisoned, leaving Robert's father bedridden in the hospital after a stroke.
His long-term alcohol abuse has damaged his central nervous system. He will be bedridden for the rest of his life.
Knowing the fate of this family, I finally felt a sense of justice. Passing by a supermarket, I picked the most expensive-looking ice cream and tossed it to Anna Smith.
Thanks for your help this time. I don't have much pocket money, so I can only treat you to ice cream.
No need to be so polite. Tearing off the wrapper and taking a big bite, as long as you're okay.
His words left me stunned. I suddenly remembered how, in my previous life, he had knelt at the police station, pleading for justice on my behalf. Could he know about my rebirth? A chill ran down my spine.
What are you daydreaming about? We're going to be late for class.
Oh, coming.
Looking up, the warm sunlight fell on the boy's white shirt, resembling a cliché movie scene. Never mind. I suddenly felt that whether he knew or not didn't matter anymore. If I didn't move forward, I'd be late. I had a dream. Daisy had passed away. She sent me a message asking for help, but I was too late. When I arrived, she was lying there, lifeless. It was so distressing, it made me cry. I woke up with a start. Outside, the cicadas were noisily chirping. The bald old professor was droning on at the podium. Ugh! I played games too late last night and ended up falling asleep in class. I pulled out my phone. One unread message from Daisy. My hand shook, and my new phone's screen cracked. I rushed out of the classroom and called Daisy. First call, no answer. Second call, no answer. Third call.
What do you want? I'm in class.
You're not gone?
Then she scolded me thoroughly. I remembered to check the message she had sent earlier. She asked if I could check the surveillance at my family's KTV.
Seriously? Such a trivial matter. My family owns so many places, I could give her 2 of them. As long as she stays well, anything is fine.